So I'm here with my buddy Scott Stiles. Scott is the founder of Fair Agency. I'll let him tell you about what that is. I came down from Shenzhen to Hong Kong to do a talk today. Scott and I connected and said, hey, why don't we go to lunch together? And then I was like, hey, why don't we interview you and talk about your agency and what you're doing? Because Scott's business is amazing, and what he's doing as a nonprofit here in Hong Kong is changing an entire industry. And it's an industry that matters, that this is impacting people's lives in a very real, tangible, substantive way. And as we talk about this, you're going to see why this is so meaningful and why this matters and why this is a big deal. I hope there's some takeaways for other entrepreneurs out there, especially social venture type entrepreneurs, because if you can follow the stuff that Scott's doing, where he's changing an industry, but through capitalism, I think there's a lot of power to change other industries as well and other places around the world. So, all right, so there's the intro. So Scott, first of all, what is Fair Agency? What do you do? Like, what's this all about here?
So we are a nonprofit agency for migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong. And so basically, there's huge problems with forced labor and slavery. Actually, there's some reports that came out just this week. More than 50% of the world's slaves are debt bonded. And that means they're people who owe money, and that's why they're stuck in their jobs.
And the thing is, like, in my mind, when you say slave, I'm thinking of like a movie of like slaves in the United States like 200 years ago, you know, with like chains. But like, I might pass a slave, quote unquote, here on the street in Hong Kong. I mean, I do. I pass these people every day on the street. I don't know that they're slaves because they're not wearing chains. But they are locked into something that they don't want to be part of. They are being forced to work. Explain a little bit more like about the worker situation here and how this works in Hong Kong. Like, how is this all set up?
Okay, perfect.
Who are these people?
Yeah, so basically in Hong Kong there's about 350,000 of these migrant domestic workers. And what they are is they're Filipino and Indonesian women primarily that come to Hong Kong because they want to seek opportunity. Basically, they have the opportunity to come here and work as maids in people's homes. In order to get a job, they go to these employment agencies, which they have to use, and these employment agencies basically...
They have to use why?
Because the governments require them to. There are processes and things, there's protections that agencies are supposed to put in place for these workers, but oftentimes they don't. And so what happens with these workers is they're paying between 4 and 7 months of their salary is going directly to the agent who found them a job. And so, in short, instead of them coming here, saving money, sending it back to their family at home, they're locked in a situation where they can't leave their job because they're indebted for the first 7 months.
And they're in debt from day one.
From day one.
It's like they arrive, they're already 6 months in debt.
Yeah, and then the problem is that in order to sustain their family back at home through the other, however long they're abroad, they have to actually take out loans in order to sustain themselves from day one as well. So they're actually refinancing their debt from day one and taking out more in order to pay for their family's lifestyle. So that 4 to 7 months, it doesn't actually represent the cycle of debt bondage that occurs in Hong Kong. And so what we did is we basically looked at the system and said, okay, you have these workers who are being exploited. They're charging...
Because they can't escape from this. Because, I mean, if they're here for 2 years, they're in more debt at the end of 2 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, they are sending money back, but they're not making enough extra to pay off that debt, so it's like they can never leave.
They're toast. Yeah.
So now what happens if they did like sneak out? I mean, well...
They're afraid, right? And we don't need to... You hear different stories about things that happen there, but it depends on where the debt originated. So that gets a little bit more complicated, but the fact is they're afraid. And that fear is what creates a debt bondage, or it's forced labor, it's modern slavery. And so from our perspective, we looked at the system and we said, well, you have these workers who are being exploited and ripped off, and you have these agencies on the other hand who have no incentive to do a good job. Because what these agencies do is they say, hey, they'll go to the employer and say, hey, you pay us a fee, so that the employer pays them a fee. They then say, okay, with that fee, now I'll give you free replacements, right? And then what their incentive is to then find as many people to get into that job as possible. So they want to get workers into a job and then get them fired relatively quickly. And when they've done that, they've created a cycle where they pump people and they churn people through the system instead of creating long-term success like a normal market would dictate. But the problem is that it's no longer a market transaction when they're getting paid by the person who they're finding a job for. And so they have no incentive to actually do a good job. And so from our perspective, we said, okay, so you have employers who are upset with this. They're not getting the services that are promised them. You have workers who are also being horribly taken advantage of. And these are people who are doing what we tell people to do to be successful.
So explain this part to me. So why would the employer go back to this agency if they're churning through a bunch of people that are terrible workers? Why would they continue to go back to that agency?
Because that agency, what they'll typically do is they'll say, hey, it's buy one, get three free. Or buy one, free replacements, basically. And so they are replacing these people for free. And so the employers are looking at these agencies saying, well, they're not very good at their job as far as making these matches. But they kind of, I guess they have my best interests at heart because
there's a guarantee.
Because there's a guarantee here, but what they don't understand is that guarantee means that their incentives are misaligned.
And the guarantee kind of locks them in because it's like, well, I don't want to go somewhere else. I already paid this agency, and they've got the guarantee, so maybe I just got a bad one, so I just need to replace that one. And
that's exactly it. Yeah, and so they create this churn in the system. And so when we looked at it, we said, well, this is really simple. This is a market problem that needs a market solution. And so we said the best thing to do is let's go ahead and start a company that is an employment agency just like all these other guys and compete with them and beat them at what they do. And we've been happy to have done that over the last few years.
Okay, so how did you do it?
So what we did is we became an employment agency. So we set one up, me and my two co-founders. We set up an employment agency, and so about 3 years ago, it was just a few of us in the office, and we were doing, we did a few placements our first month, and this last month, I believe we did close to 100 placements, and we now have 20 full-time staff in our company here in Hong Kong, and we have a training center in the Philippines. And what we're seeing is big, kind of significant market impact and market change that's occurring, and we're excited to see that because that's what we want. I mean, this is a pretty solvable problem. You have people being taken advantage of, people who are unhappy. You have this agency structure in the middle that's exploiting both sides, and so going after that.
So you have the employer. How are you serving the employer better? Is it because you're placing people that now they're happy with? You provide a higher quality? How are you competing from the employer standpoint? How are you competing?
Great question. So this is one of the things that we're excited about because this is when we first got started. People said, okay, well, this will never work because you'll get the hippie person that wants to use you, and they'll use you because you're ethical or you're good in charity, and they're trying to feel good about themselves. The reality is those agencies that are ripping off workers have been incentivized to do a bad job. When we talk to an employer, we say, hey, those guys have been incentivized to do a bad job. They want to place the most desperate person or the person willing to pay the most in your home, not the person most qualified. The incentives change very quickly for them, and they start to realize, oh, maybe this is a good option. And so we've been happy where the failure rate in the industry has been, we understand to be between 30 and 40%. Ours is around 10 or 11%. And the satisfaction from employers, we're at 97% of our employers would refer us to a friend, and they do. And 96% of our workers are happy after the first 2 months of their job. And so that gives you an indicator where all you have to do is you have to do thorough vetting, you have to do things the right way, and look at where the incentives line up, and things can change pretty quickly.
So on the one hand, the employers are happier with you because you're providing a higher quality worker and they don't have to go rehire, so they don't have to worry about a guarantee because they just get somebody good to begin with. On the other hand, the workers are happier because they're being treated better by you as an agency, and also you're more diligent in screening the employers, I'm guessing, as well, so you're placing them in better places.
Yeah, our whole thing is we want to create successful work environments. So it's not a matter of we want fancy homes or we need this or no. It's we want to place them in homes where they can be successful and be a successful employee, and that's what we're shooting for. And so we do some vetting on that side as well, like any recruiting firm would do. You're going to check and see if you think it's realistic that you can successfully place somebody in any employment situation.
So pricing wise, how are you structured compared to the competition? I mean, same price, higher, lower?
At this point in time, we're pretty much the same price as everybody else. And that's been kind of, there's been, our whole focus is we want to kind of be a mass market solution. If we came in and we were 3 times more expensive than everybody else, we could, be profitable and that would be great, but we wouldn't have the scale or the ability to impact the market like we do if we're kind of in the middle of the road price-wise.
Okay.
And that price, we price ourselves, it's about $1,000, $1,200 US is what it costs to use our service. So it's a pretty good value for what we're looking for.
Okay, so basically same price, better quality, all around throughout the entire process. So you started this business and it started out, and then what's really made it take off? How has it grown? What have been the major factors in that growth? So, word of mouth, or has it been?
Yeah, word of mouth for sure. So 55% of our clients come as referrals from friends. So one of the key things is that we picked a market that was definitely broken, that nobody was happy with, right? We didn't choose some an industry or a business where there was some big player that everybody says, oh, they're great. We chose one that we thought, okay, we can go compete with anybody. That's what we did. So for the market just being broken was a good starting point for us to be successful. Referrals from friends is 55% of our business, and then social media is 18%. Are coming from referrals from social media groups. And I think it's a really powerful thing that we've clued into, and not by trying to initiate it ourselves, but it's just happened very naturally. And when you create a really excellent experience for somebody in a place where they've had terrible experiences or had heard horror stories previously, they're going to share it with their friends. And that's where we've kind of engaged that, and we make people feel and believe what we're doing, right? And it's not just people who say, oh, I want to be ethical or I want to do the right thing. They say, hey, this is an important hiring decision. I'm hiring the person to take care of my kids. I want to use the best service in doing that. And pretty much people from all different backgrounds can buy into that and believe in that.
How's the competition responding to this? Because now you're a threat, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've actually been, we've developed good relationships with some of the big competitors. I think that this is a broken industry. There's 1,300 employment agencies in Hong Kong that do domestic worker placements, and it's just broken, and it's fragmented, and there's all kinds of issues there. And so I think that people have known that there was change happening for a long time. We're also happy to see governments getting involved at the right areas and focusing on the right things as far as making sure that it's not forced labor, which is also going to naturally force some of the people out who aren't able to compete. And so we actually have developed pretty good relationships with across the board. And it's not our incentive to destroy their industry, it's to make it a real industry that can work long term, instead of something where you pump cash out until you get closed down by governments, which is what they're facing.
Are you seeing other agencies now start up with your model or change their model to be more like yours? Are they adopting your practices?
Yeah, so I mean, we've had some of the big agencies, we've seen them follow different parts of our practices over time. And so and for us, I'm excited about that, right? And we set ourselves up it because we wanted that, right? We wanted people to follow us and copy what we do. If we're a for-profit business that has to report to shareholders, then I have to be upset by that, and I have to be offended. And so we've seen a few new agencies that are popping up in other countries as well. So, we've had conversations with people in the seafood industry in Thailand, and Cambodia, and Myanmar, people in Singapore, Taiwan, all these different places. And because when they see a model that's working and they see that it can grow, to the scale that we are at right now, get excited about it.
Mm-hmm. So what can you do for workers who are in the middle of this debt? I mean, they're already in debt, they're kind of stuck. Is there something you can do for them if they come to you in the middle of that problem, that mess?
Yeah, so that's where we have to be really focused on what we do. And so there's a Bible proverb, and it's Jesus talking, and he talks about 99 sheep and the one sheep. And basically what he says is if you have 99 sheep and you lost one, you should go back and get the one and bring it on. Right? We're not Jesus. From our perspective, what we want to do is we want to get those 99 sheep as far along as we can. We want to create as much large-scale progress in the system. And there's other NGOs and groups that do a great job of backing and supporting that one sheep that needs to be helped guided along, whether they need legal help, they need housing, whatever the resources or things that they need are. There's other NGOs that do an awesome job of that. If we tried to do that, we wouldn't be as good at it, and it would distract us from moving the 99 forward like we want to.
Mm-hmm. So you said there are 1,300 agencies here in Hong Kong, and there's some of the big ones. When you say a big one, how do you measure that size, and where do you fit in with that?
Oh, let's see. Yeah. Biggest agencies are for Filipino workers. We're actually in the similar size too. We're definitely in the top 10.
Ones,
yeah, we're in the top 10 as far as placement numbers, and that's happened pretty quickly.
Does that mean you're on a growth path where you're going to be the biggest?
Yeah.
Soon.
Once you factor in, because there's different countries where they're pulling from, our vision is by 2020 to be the biggest agency in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And I think we're definitely on track to do that. And I think that we're putting things into place to make ourselves more scalable. Now, what makes this a challenging business is that it's a one-to-one match, right? There's not many recruiting firms that you'll ever talk to that we have right now about 1,700 individual employers who we've placed people with over the last few years. There's not many recruitment firms or any sort of agency service that will deal with that many people and those types of volumes. And we're individually matching them one person to one person. And so that's one of the kind of the growth constraints just in working with domestic workers or kind of maids and nannies. But that's something we knew going in, and we feel like we're going to be as successful as anybody in scaling that industry.
How far do you think it can scale? I mean, is this an industry where you could grab 10% market share or something, or is that just...
Oh, I think we could definitely do 10% market share. I mean, I think, our vision, we have kind of our whole theory of change is built around its best, biggest influence impact. So the first step is being the best at what we do, right? So we choose flawed markets to enter, and we are then the best at whatever we're going to do. If you're the best, you're going to grow, generally, right? And if we don't think that we can grow once we're the best, we're not going to choose to enter that activity because it doesn't make sense. So then it's about becoming the biggest. We're in that phase right now where we're trying to become the biggest. We're big enough now that we have some influence, but we still have a ways to go. Because the next step is influence, and that's about being there to be kind of a voice of reason on labor issues are very tricky, right? Because it's often construed as there's a winner and a loser in any sort of labor negotiation, labor topic. When in reality, employment, by definition, should be a win-win. And so we believe that if we come in and we're able to give people real win-win solutions, and we're able to influence the market to go that way, whether we're talking with government, we're talking with other agency or industry players, or if we're talking with NGOs and people on the other side, we feel like all three of those groups, if we can provide win-win solutions, are going to do it. And that's what's going to ultimately lead to impact. And that's changing the broad market from where it stands right now as being somewhat flawed with decent laws in place, but little implementation and little enforcement, to being something that's really a way for people to exit poverty. Because that's the way we really see this.
So where are you going next with this? What's the next step?
Yeah, so no, that's fun. We recently launched a training center in the Philippines, and that is about growing out and creating a pipeline of people who are prepared to come and be migrants, right? When we first started, we went and we toured training centers in the Philippines. And so we would walk through, and you'd walk into these big empty rooms, and you'd walk in, there'd be 15 people sitting in the corner of the room doing nothing. We would walk in and they would all jump up, and they have the unsanitary French feather dusters. It's like a piece of wood with the legitimate, like real feathers that are poking out of it. And they all dust off the 1970s style TV set that's in the corner. And they all surround, so 15 people surrounding one piece of furniture. Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. They're not being prepared for migration. And so you can see where you have this broken system where you have people who are leaving oftentimes poverty, and extreme poverty in many cases. And they're coming to Hong Kong and being told that they're going to be wealthy and they're going to suddenly make all this money and life's going to be easy. And they're not being prepared for migration, because migration is hard for everybody. I mean, both you and I have gone through that process. And so somebody who's coming from a very different background and taking on a whole new life, living in their home with their boss, that's hard. And so we saw the opportunity to influence the market from the training side. And so we set up that training center, and that's been something that's growing and coming along. And then the next step is controlling an agency in the Philippines. And we focused on the Philippines because it's the place where it can be successful. I think there's oftentimes a move by nonprofit community or social innovators or people to choose the hardest place to operate because those are the people that are the most needy. Remember, that gets back to the 99 and the 1. Yeah. We want to go places where we can be successful, so that we can then take success to the flawed places or flawed geographies or countries or wherever it may be, and point and give them a kind of a playbook for how they can do it. And so we're focusing on the Philippines because that will allow us to then control the whole supply chain coming here to Hong Kong, and then also look at different industries where we know there's a lot of exploitation. And as we pursue those industries, we'll be able to kind of build and create more scale in what we're doing, and then ultimately build something that impacts millions of people. And that's really what we feel like we're building today.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit more about, you said you get involved with governments and the government policy and affecting things at a policy level for change within the industry. Talk a little bit more about that.
So, and I wouldn't say that, I mean, our desire in Hong Kong, in particular, policy isn't a focus for us. We're able to, sometimes government, they will have an open door if you have solutions for them. We're not advocating for any legislative changes. The things that the government is doing or trying to do, we're mostly in support of. We don't feel like us being the advocates is our best position. We're actually, when we get the chance to sit down and talk with somebody, we love to talk, and we love to explain to them where we see things are going. But we don't see ourselves as an advocacy organization. I think that's one of our strengths, is that people will actually talk to us if they don't feel like the words are going to be twisted, as can happen with a lot of groups.
But you have influenced regulations and policy.
At times, yeah, we've been able to talk to people and kind of help guide them along, and that's where we feel like we can be successful, but we try to make that kind of it's a result of the good work we're doing at the agency level.
Yeah,
it's not the focus, and it's not
what
we don't set out to change policy, but when somebody asks, we're happy to give our advice and our input.
Mm-hmm. And you have been able to develop these good relationships because they can see that you're doing good work and that you're running a good business, right?
Well, and our incentives are, we're coming in, we're saying, Philippines has good laws for migrant workers, Hong Kong has good laws for migrant workers. Both of these groups want this to be a successful migration situation, right? So when we start and use that as the starting point, people will open up their door and they want to talk to you. And we believe that, right? It's not just lip service. We're here, we're doing this because we believe this is a solvable world problem. particularly for these two demographics. So it's, for us, I mean, we're excited, and I think they can feel that we're excited and we believe in them, the change that they can make.
Again, I mean, I've said this a bunch of times to you, but I just love this because it's capitalism at work. It's so easy when you feel strongly about something and you want to be altruistic. It's easy to say, well, I can't make any money, or I feel guilty doing good stuff and making money at the same time. And if I want to change something like this, I have to advocate, or I have to protest, or I have to do this. And I love how you've come in and said, we're going to change things by starting a business and competing against a flawed system. And we're going to show people how to do it the right way. And that you can be profitable and actually be more profitable if you do it the right way, and then go sleep peacefully at night too. And you've done it. And I just love that story because it's like, see, like,
It can work. It can work.
It can work. Like, the system can work. A free market can work. And it can lead to good things. And really, you're developing an advantage. Like you said, you're on your way to becoming the biggest agency here in Hong Kong. You know, I get a lot of people who say, oh, free markets don't work. You have market failure. You have all this stuff. And I'm always like, yeah, but it's temporary. In the long run, people who do things the right way do win in the long run. And I love your example because I feel like it kind of proves my point that, yeah, the system's been broken for a long time. But then you saw the opportunity in that broken system. You're creating the fix, and it's working. And I think there's just a great story there.
Thank you. Yeah, we're proud of it. But that's the thing. I mean, and for us, I mean, this is a situation that needs some government involvement, right? There's a lot of things where I think the government can just totally stay out of. But this, when you have these people that are coming from these desperate situations, there needs to be some oversight to make sure some things are happening, because you have such an unusual power dynamic where you have somebody who's extremely poor in another country. They don't have enough money to leave a job.
There's a civil rights issue here, right?
There's kind of a,
I mean, there's kind of a,
human rights.
You've got fraud, you've got human rights, you've got individual rights, civil rights, whatever you want to call it. But you've got those issues going on. I mean, if there's any justification, I'm pretty libertarian, but if there's any justification for government intervention, it's to protect individual rights. Yeah, and that's what I see here is that, I mean, the laws are there to protect workers against fraud, against outright abuse, and those things. And that's something where I'm like, I can be okay with that. I can compromise. I can be okay with that.
No, and I think, and that's basically it, right? And when you do that, and then you create a structure, but then you have to create a structure where it can actually be successful, right? Because if we came out and we just said our competitive advantage is that we're warm and fuzzy, you're right, it's going to fail.
Yeah,
right? And that's
we're warm and fuzzy, and we have to charge twice as much because we can't survive otherwise. That wouldn't work.
Yeah,
right?
No, and that was, I mean, from the very get-go, we made a decision, us being a nonprofit, because sometimes people with kind of, when we tell this story, it's a story of capitalism, but we went and raised money with people who said, I want to back something that can be a market solution, right? Mm-hmm. And so we raised donation dollars to get ourselves going. And I haven't regretted that for a second. You know, it would be a lot easier for us to go raise private money and raise money that was, well, all of it's private, but to raise for-profit money. Our fundraising would go a lot easier. But our ability to influence these spots would be diminished. Now, hopefully over time, what we want to see is more people like us operating.
Like, you'd be glad if somebody came in and started a for-profit business and copied you.
Yeah.
You'd be like, that's great. It's improving the market, right?
Go for it, dude. Yep. And we've helped them.
We've helped people do that.
We helped people do that. And I mean, we walked them through what we did, and we've given them advice, and we've helped them get going. And they're our competitors in some ways, but this is a huge broken market. And there's
you've got 1,300 companies. It's like, there's room for everybody, right?
Exactly. As long as they're not copying our branding and name.
Right.
So yeah, no, we've actually been really supportive of that, because in the long run, we see ourselves as we drop down into the different countries, and as we kind of go to the exporting side, we see those people as potential partners. So that's the way we feel like we can build something that's really sustainable and something that can be bigger than us, right? Bigger than what's in this room right now.
Cool. So what's the website?
Fairagency.org.
Fairagency.org. Cool. Thanks for talking with me.
Thanks.
It's been fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Take care.